I am your host, Robert Rowe, and you are listening to Awake Radio. That needs to be brought to your attention. Police raid a Boise marijuana activist residence and seize their 4 children. On April 24th, 2013, in Boise, Idaho, after illegally entering into a Boise residence, police and Child Protective Services took custody of 4 children whose age ranged from 5 to 11 years old. The parents of the children are marijuana activists Sarah Caldwell, mother of 2 of the boys taken, and Lindsay and Josh Reinhardt, who also had 2 boys taken away from them. This raid took place after a complaint was leveled at one of the children at his elementary school when the boy's friend was caught with marijuana. Not the boy himself, the boy's friend was caught with marijuana and apparently rolled over on the boy. The school's resource officer, an armed Boise Police Department officer, brought the child home after 7 hours of confinement to the school office. Once at home, the officer immediately began to intimidate an elderly woman who was babysitting the children in order to gain access to the house. According to a neighbor, the officer literally came face to face with the elderly woman who was in her 80s during his intimidation process. He had no warrant. None was issued at this time. However, the officer threatened the babysitter with arrest for obstruction if she did not allow him entry for a well child check. Now, those of you who are involved in the 420 community understand that the term well child check means a knock and talk. It means they are looking for a reason to come in and bust you. After gaining entry to the house, the officer separated the 4 children from the babysitter and began to illegally search the house. Upon finding marijuana paraphernalia and other items that he deemed incriminating, the officer called the Boise Police Department and asked them to provide a warrant so he may continue searching the premises. The warrant arrived hours later, along with Child Protective Services, who immediately took all 4 children into custody. Child Protective Services did not wait for evidence to be collected. They simply came in, collected the children, and left. Now, the warrant that was issued authorized officers to confiscate evidence which could be used in drug trafficking charges. Police confiscated several items, including cell phones and receipts. Charges against the Reinhardts and Ms. Caldwell are pending at the time of this broadcast. A hearing was conducted today to determine the placement of the children, to determine whether or not they could go back home with their parents, or whether they needed to be placed in foster care. I have not yet received word on the results of that hearing. As soon as I do, I will update everybody. I contacted Boise Police Department in an effort to find out what they had to say about it. I asked them for a statement, and they have not yet returned my calls. Now, Lindsay Reinhardt uses the substance, marijuana, for medicinal purposes only, and she claims that she is not involved in trafficking of marijuana. The state of Idaho, however, does not recognize marijuana as a medical treatment for anything. In fact, Idaho has some of the toughest anti-marijuana laws in the country, despite Idaho's overwhelming public support for its use both medicinally and recreationally. Caldwell and the Reinhardts are actively pursuing the legalization of marijuana in Idaho, and that's the reason they believe they are being targeted, is because of their activism. Lindsay, who is disabled, has frequently testified at the state capitol, at hearings at the state capitol, on the merits of hemp production and marijuana use as a medical treatment for certain diseases, such as cancer, glaucoma, you name it. There are all kinds of things that marijuana can be used to treat. Both the Caldwells and the Reinhardts have lectured across the state on these subjects as well. I interviewed a friend of the family, founding director of Moms for Marijuana International, Sarah Frank, and she told me that the Reinhardts and Sarah were at a retreat hiking in the mountains when the police came and raided their house. Moms for Marijuana International is an organization that was founded on April 4, 2005 for the purpose of educating and raising awareness on the issue of marijuana and hemp uses. It has members in 120 cities across the world, in 12 countries on 5 continents. Our purpose, says Frank, is to change the perception parents have about marijuana. We see children across the country whose futures have been destroyed because their parents called the police on them for possession when they didn't have to do so. It is a shame to see some of these children may spend up to 20 years in prison for nothing. She told me, referring to a case in Illinois of a child who is serving just such a sentence. Moms for Marijuana International plans to organize a national call to action campaign in an attempt to bring pressure to bear on local, state, and federal politicians to change the marijuana laws in Idaho and to drop all proceedings against the Reinhardts and Caldwell. This is absolutely outrageous, folks. We don't remove children from their homes for something as minor as marijuana use. Yes, marijuana is illegal in the state of Idaho, and if you're going to use marijuana in Idaho for any reason at all, you have to expect that they are going to come after you. But there is a line that needs to be drawn, and the police and state officials in the state of Idaho have crossed that line. I mean, seriously, taking kids away from their parents just because they use marijuana for medicinal purposes. I mean, what kind of messed up world do we live in when this kind of stuff happens? It is clear by their actions that they are using these people as pawns in their quest to maintain control over Idahoans. This is just one attempt on their part to quell the growing acceptance of marijuana usage in that state. And the state has chosen to abuse children in order to get their point across. This is an unacceptable situation. Now, if you want to know how you can help Moms for Marijuana International, or how you can help Sarah and Lindsay and Josh, you can visit their webpage at www.momsformarijuana.org/blog1.php/Sarah-Lindsay-and-Josh. This is typical of what we are facing in this country today. When the powers that be decide that they want to control us to the point that they are going to make the decisions as to what is right for us and what is not right for us, what is good for us and what is not good for us, what is healthy for us and what is not healthy for us, these are the kinds of actions that are going to happen. When you couple that with the fact that most people believe that the state has the authority to conduct these kind of actions, we end up with a police state. And that is exactly what Idaho has become with this action, a police state. When I spoke with Sarah Frank on the phone today, we were discussing some of the efforts that activists in the state of Idaho have undertaken in order to get the medical marijuana issue on the ballot, or get the hemp issues on the ballot. According to the state law of Idaho, 6% of the voting population must sign petitions in order to get that ballot, or get that on the ballot. Excuse me. That roughly translates to about 55,000 people, according to Ms. Frank. Now, they are in the process of obtaining those signatures. When in the middle of this process, the state suddenly decides they are going to change the rules. And so now they change the rules to be that you have to have 6% of the voting population in each county of the state. Now, Ms. Frank tells me that it will cost normally about $200,000 to get 6% of the entire state's voting population to sign the petition to get it on the ballot. Under the new rules, which, to be fair, will not apply for the petition that they are currently working on because it is grandfathered in under the old rules. But under the new rules, if they were to start a new petition, it would cost approximately $3 million to get these petitions signed because they would have to go to every single county in Idaho. This is just one of the games that the state likes to play to keep people off balance, to make it more difficult for them to make laws that they want, that they think are appropriate to run their society. It is not up to the officials of the state to determine what laws the people should live by. It is up to the people of the state to determine what laws they want to live by. But the politicians in the state of Idaho have decided that they know better than the people what is good for the people. They know better than the people what the people want. And this kind of behavior must be stopped. It is up to the people of Idaho now to change that situation. It is up to the people of Idaho to now vote out the communists that are currently running their state and vote in liberty-minded people who will pay attention to the desires of the people of the state. Because if they do not, children will continue to be abused by the system in order to manipulate the system to the bidding of those who want to destroy freedom. Oh, so you think that I'm being a little bit sarcastic, maybe, because I'm saying that children are abused. So think about this when you're starting to question that. This child was torn from his class, made to sit for 7 hours in the principal's office, only to be taken home by an armed policeman. Once home, he has to witness his grandmother being yelled at and intimidated by that same policeman, only to find himself then ripped from his home and placed in the custody of people who couldn't give a shit about him. And you're trying to think that that child's not abused in any way? You know, it's funny how liberals are all about, we don't want to abuse our children, because if we abuse our children, then they're going to turn out to be bad people when they grow up, and we don't want that. And then they go and they do this kind of shit. Seriously. This is what we have come to in this country. This is normal business for this country. And I find it sad. I find it deplorable that we allow this to continue for no reason other than it interferes with American Idol. Wake the fuck up, people. It's time to get off your asses and get out there and do something about it. This is wrong, and we need to stand up against what is wrong. Because if we don't, then we deserve everything we get. I'm Robert Rowe. I hope you enjoyed this show today. If you have any questions or comments about this show, please feel free to give me an email at rrowe@awarenessact.com. That's rrowe@awarenessact.com. Or you can leave me a message on my Awareness Act page, or you can send me a private message at Awareness Act. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.
There was a lawyer once. His name was Francis Scott Key. He penned a song that I'm sure you're aware of. You've seen it. It's in most hymnals throughout our churches. It's called the national anthem. It is our song as an American. We go, however, to a ball game. We stand in our church services and we sing the words of that song, and they float over our minds and our lips, and we don't even realize what we're singing. Most of us have memorized it as a child, but we've never really thought about what it means. Let me tell you a story. Francis Scott Key was a lawyer in Baltimore. The colonies were engaged in vicious conflict with the mother country, Britain. Because of this conflict and the protractedness of it, they had accumulated prisoners on both sides. The American colonies had prisoners and the British had prisoners. And the American government initiated a move. They went to the British and they said, let us negotiate for the release of these prisoners. They said, we want to send a man out to discuss this with you. They were holding the American prisoners in boats about 1,000 yards offshore. And they said, we want to send a man by the name of Francis Scott Key. He will come out and negotiate to see if we can make a mutual exchange. On the appointed day, in a rowboat, he went out to this boat and he negotiated with the British officials. And they reached a conclusion that men could be exchanged on a one-for-one basis. Francis Scott Key, jubilant with the fact that he'd been successful, went down below in the boats, and what he found was a cargo hold full of humanity, men. And he said, men, I've got news for you tonight. You're free. He said, tonight I have negotiated successfully your return to the colonies. He said, you'll be taken out of this boat, out of this filth, out of your chains. As he went back up on board to arrange for their passage to the shore, the admiral came and he said, we have a slight problem. He said, we will still honor our commitment to release these men, but it'll be merely academic after tonight. It won't matter. And Francis Scott Key said, what do you mean? He said, well, Mr. Key, he said, tonight we have laid an ultimatum upon the colonies. Your people will either capitulate and lay down the colors of that flag that you think so much of, or you see that fort right over there, Fort Henry? He said, we're going to remove it from the face of the earth. He said, how are you going to do that? He said, if you will, scan the horizon of the sea. And as he looked, he could see hundreds of little dots. And he said, that's the entire British war fleet. He said, all of the gunpowder, all of the armament is being called upon to demolish that fort. It will be here within striking distance in a matter of about 2.5 hours. He said, the war is over. These men would be free anyway. He said, you can't shell that fort. He said, that's a large fort. He said, it's full of women and children. He says, it's predominantly not a military fort. He said, don't worry about it. They said, we've left them a way out. And he said, what's that? He said, do you see that flag way up on the rampart? He said, we have told them that if they will lower that flag, the shelling will stop immediately. And we'll know that they've surrendered, and you'll now be under British rule. Francis Scott Key went down below and told the men what was about to happen. And they said, how many ships? He said, hundreds. The ships got closer. Francis Scott Key went back up on top and he said, men, I'll shout down to you what's going on as we watch. As twilight began to fall, and as the haze hung over the ocean as it does at sunset, suddenly the British war fleet unleashed. He says the sound was deafening. There were so many guns that there were no reliefs. He said it was absolutely impossible to talk or hear. He said suddenly the sky, although dark, was suddenly lit. And he says from down below, all he could hear the men, the prisoners, saying was, tell us where the flag is. What have they done with the flag? Is the flag still flying over the rampart? Tell us. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours into the shelling, every time the bomb would explode and it would be close to the flag, they could see the flag in the illuminated red glare of that bomb. And Francis Scott Key would report down to the men below, it's still up. It's not down. The admiral came and he said, "Your people are insane." He said, "What's the matter with them?" He said, "Don't they understand this is an impossible situation?" Francis Scott Key said he remembered what George Washington had said. He said, "The thing that sets the American Christian apart from all other people in the world is he will die on his feet before he'll live on his knees." The admiral said, "We have now instructed all of the guns to focus on the rampart to take that flag down." He said, "We don't understand something. Our reconnaissance tells us that that flag has been hit directly again and again and again, and yet it's still flying. We don't understand that." But he said, "Now we're about to bring every gun for the next 3 hours to bear on that point." Francis Scott Key said the barrage was unmerciful. All that he could hear was the men down below praying. The prayer, "God, keep that flag flying where we last saw it." Sunrise came. He said there was a heavy mist hanging over the land, but the rampart was tall enough. There stood the flag, completely nondescript, in shreds. The flagpole itself was at a crazy angle, but the flag was still at the top. Francis Scott Key went aboard and immediately went into Fort Henry to see what had happened. And what he'd found had happened was that that flagpole and that flag had suffered repetitious direct hits. And when it had fallen, but men, fathers, who knew what it meant for that flag to be on the ground, although knowing that all of the British guns were trained on it, walked over and held it up humanly until they died. Their bodies were removed and others took their place. Francis Scott Key said what held that flagpole in place at that unusual angle were patriots' bodies. He penned the song, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Or the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that the flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet fly and wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?" The debt was demanded. The price, it was paid.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets break clear, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land